Bulan.
Expected. Thank you all for waiting for a few Fiji time minutes. And let's start now. So, I'm Ariel, General Manager of GSTC, and today I will moderate an excellent panel that I was very happy from the beginning to moderate it on reef protection, coral restoration, and responsible diving. Protecting coral reef, restoring damaged ecosystems, and promoting responsible diving are all interconnected themes. In this session, we will discuss coral restoration techniques, perhaps not those that you think of, the impact of tourism on reef health, strategies for ensuring that diving and snorkeling activities contribute to conservation efforts, and more of that. Before I introduce the panelists, let's do a short poll. Okay? Everyone has already used Slido, so log in and please choose the answer that would fit you here. When was the last time you joined an organized snorkel or dive tour? In the last month, in the last 6 months, in the last year, within the last 2 years, or never? You appreciate water, you drink them, but not when you're in them. Can we see also how many replied afterwards? But that should be fine. Everyone is replied. 15, okay. 16. There are more here. 17, we see 17, 18, 19, and more. 20. We reach 24, then we'll continue. Another one. Okay. Wow, that's impressive. So it seems that everyone loves that activity. We've all been snorkeling, diving, or doing something like that, so I guess that's why we're here in this session, and that's good to see. Good. So, when we have now everyone's attention and passion, let me introduce the first speaker of today's panel. Dr. Frank Griffin, Executive Director of the Coral Triangle Initiative on Coral Reefs, Fisheries, and Food Security, CTI-CFF, a nice acronym. But Dr. Griffin, who's sitting here, you might find modest, but actually has over 20 years of experience working in government, intergovernmental, and international organizations. The title of doctor also is there because it's been working for the universities before, and it's very active in places. He has a vast experience in managing, maintaining, and establishing partnership in work area pertinent to the organizations that he has worked for. Partnerships includes JICA, OSAID, New Zealand Aid, AFD, EU, and so forth. Dr. Griffin, his leadership approach is about inclusiveness. He works with people and empowers them to excel in their positions. So, Dr. Frank.
Thank you, Roy. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting us to be part of this wonderful meeting conference. The organization that I represent doesn't usually work in the area of tourism, but through the work that we do support a lot of activities that revolve around tourism-oriented work. And as the title of the session goes, reef protection, coral restoration, and responsible diving. That's all we do in the Coral Triangle region. I wanted to start off by showing you this graph, this diagram. We all know that the Amazon is the home to the highest flora, biodiversity in the world. The Congo Basin is the home to both flora and fauna, but many of you would not know where in the world would you find the highest biodiversity in the marine environment. That's found not so far from here in the Coral Triangle region, and that's the one on the right hand side. And it focuses on marine, coastal, and coral reefs. A closer look at the region itself. It's an area that is covered by. Sorry. You get lost in these things sometimes. Yeah. So a closer look at the region. It's an area that's covered by 6 countries. Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia on the northern part of the triangle, or what looks like a triangle. Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and Solomon Islands on the southern side of it. So why is the Coral Triangle important, or why does it matter? It is, as I said, it has the highest coral reef diversity. In that, let's go back. In this small area that you see of the world, it is home to over a third of the coral reefs in the world. A third in that small space. It is home to over 76% of the coral reef species that you will find in the world. And we have 16 ecoregions in the triangle. In each of these 16 ecoregions, you can find over 600 different coral species in there. So the richness is amazing. It is also, because of the speciation in coral species, it is also home to 37% of reef fish species that you can find anywhere in the world. It supports livelihood and socio-economic structures in the 450 million people that inhabit the 6 countries. It also is, as we all know, the reef systems provide coastal protection, and also embedded in there the low carbon requirements that we have, that our people depend on. And finally, I want to emphasize, for the purpose of our meeting here, it also provides a huge income source in terms of tourism benefits, to the tune of some $5.7 billion from tourism. So according to the Coral Reef Economy Report that was released in 2017, as I said, the Coral Reef region generated approximately $5.7 billion, and that came from direct tourism revenues and also the indirect tourism revenues. The figures are shown on the screen there. Now these figures are based on reef-associated tourism. They include on-reef activities such as snorkeling, diving, boat tours, and also reef-adjacent tourism, including things like beach visits, coastal recreation, benefiting from the coral reef ecosystems. It's projected that if everything is kept healthy, it's projected that by 2030, the region will be generating close to $8.5 billion US. However, like everything else, and as we have had in the morning sessions, the region is facing threats, and they come in the form of overfishing, plastic pollution. It's good to hear that this week and next, hopefully they will agree on the text for the plastics treaty, so we can have a mechanism to control pollution, climate change, and also unsustainable tourism. Sadly, unsustainable tourism is a cause of the habitat degradation in the region. At the CTI-CFF, it's a multilateral partnership that was established in 2009. So we're just over 16 years old in the region. And so, as I said earlier on, the 6 member countries of the Coral Triangle Initiative include Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, Philippines, Solomon Islands, and Timor-Leste. I have been executive director for 18 months, and those 6 countries I have mentioned so many times, and I don't know them off by now. Yeah. And the work that we do is provided through 5 technical working groups, and this includes marine protected areas, threatened species, climate change adaptation, ecosystems approaches to fisheries management, and also seascapes work. So as you can see, right at the beginning I said our organization doesn't fully deal with tourism matters, but through those working groups, you will find elements of how this work can actually contribute to sustainable tourism at the regional level. Our work is actually conducted or guided by a regional plan of action, like a strategic plan for us. It's got 3 objectives, it's got 7 targets. And objective A1, the one that has a red square or rectangle around it, focuses on ensuring that coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrass beds are resilient and effectively managed through regional activities such as establishing MPAs, building and promoting ecosystems-based adaptation to climate change, and developing sustainable financial mechanisms or models to help us do our work. The area of work surrounding coral restoration is done through these working groups. So, as you can see, because of the huge diversity that we have in the region and the fact that it is home to a third of the coral reef systems in the world, we have so many MPAs. And there are over 2,400 MPAs scattered all over the triangle. About 3 weeks ago, we had a very, very useful partnership training with IUCN. So IUCN brought the 6 countries together and took them through the whole process of understanding what the green list is all about. So the green list is now fully embedded in the work that we do to make sure that our MPAs are properly managed, and the results should show hopefully in the next 4 or 5 years. So in terms of responsible diving and sustainable tourism, we do have a task force on sustainable marine tourism. They don't do management activities, let's say, but they help in promoting the codes and branding for ecotourism. So we try and, as part of our work in making sure that our reefs are protected properly, we promote codes of conduct and branding for ecotourism to make sure that our divers. Oh, so sorry. This is the slide on the web, the target A1, 2,419 MPAs, Sustainable Marine Task Force. Yep. Let me hold it on this side so I can change it. Yeah. So we promote codes of conduct for branding on ecotourism. We work with countries who help the tourism promoters or companies to make sure that things are done properly. Because we found out earlier on in the piece, in our 16 years, that so many people wanted to come and visit these beautiful coral reef systems that we have, but the tourists were not taught anything about how to look after the corals. You're nodding because you know exactly what I'm talking about. So what we found out was that there were snorkelers who were just stepping on the corals, breaking them. So we had to put in place systems to educate the snorkelers and the countries. Some of the countries actually putting in fine systems to hold the tourism operators held accountable for the destruction of the coral system. So, and then we also have a partnership under our coast fish framework that integrates poverty reduction and food security and sustainable coastal livelihood. And this is where they become part of that army of workers in making sure that the reefs are protected properly. And part of the work that we do, as I said, under the Sustainable Marine Tourism Task Force is the promotion of codes. And I don't have to tell you this, you know more about this than me. I'm just the manager of a program that does this work, but the actual work is done on the ground by the operators in each of the 6 countries. So the Green Fins Code of Conduct, this is what we promote through our different working groups in making sure that sustainable techniques, good practices are actually adopted by our tour and tourism operators. And it's been adopted by dive operators in 14 countries, including all the 6 Coral Triangle countries. So, in conclusion, I just want to leave you with a message that protecting and restoring reefs in the Coral Triangle isn't just a regional effort. It is not only our effort in the Coral Triangle region, it's a global responsibility, because when the Coral Triangle thrives, the ocean thrives. And I can give you an example that many of the discussions that we have in the region at the global level about tuna fish management, you find that people talk about catching the big tuna fish. But where do the tuna originate from? The spawning grounds of tuna you find in the Pacific Ocean, in the Indian Ocean, is the Coral Triangle region. So it is a system, a wonder of the world that is worth protecting. And although we're not directly involved in tourism, we're in the process of trying to establish a Coral Triangle Tourism Association so that our work can be, make it more visible at the global level in meetings like this. So with that, just want to say thank you in all those languages from our 6 countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. And next, for Dev Albao, Program Manager at the Reef World Foundation, to tell us more about green fins. Dev manages Reef World's programs with over a decade of experience in interdisciplinary conservation leadership. He's an avid snorkeler, freediver, and scuba diver since 15 years old, so I guess you're one of those that marked quite recent. Dev is recognized in the Philippines for their work on sustainable tourism development in marine protected areas, advocating behavior-centered design and equitable benefit sharing for local communities in the front lines for conservation. So let's hear from you, Dev, about Green Fins Reef World.
Hello, Ulan. Magandang hapon. Shout out. So I will go straight to the point. Green Fins is a program that aims to protect and conserve coral reefs with a management approach utilizing the only internationally recognized standards for scuba diving and snorkeling. You're trying? Okay, no worries. Let's imagine ourselves in a snorkeling session, right? So I'm sure many of you are very aware of how we should responsibly act while we're having these activities. And imagine seeing a group of people chopping on corals or collecting sea stars or maybe harassing a turtle, you know. So I'm sure we will have a lot of opinions about it. People like us, right? People like us who probably, after we get out of the water, we talk to the boat operator or the guide and say, you know, you should, and then, what would the boat operator or the dive guide say? Usually, in our experience, dive guide who is not familiar with green fins will probably say, I don't know what I can do about that. They are paying customers, so I'm not gonna tell them off, right? So hopefully with this program called Green Fins, and thank you, Doc Frank, for giving an introduction to that code of conduct. This is what we're trying to do is to use these standards to manage coral reef areas with the diving industry and the snorkeling industry, the users of these resources. So you already know me, my name is Deb. I manage Reef World Foundation's programs worldwide. Green Fins is our flagship program. It was launched in 2004, so that's 21 years ago, by the United Nations Environment Program. Right now, Green Fins is internationally coordinated by this UK charity where I work as the lead technical partner, but on the ground, Green Fins is owned by many organizations. It is implemented in some countries by the government agencies managing the marine resources, and in many countries as well, it's being adopted by non-government organizations supporting coastal resources or marine management. A key sector, and this is what I would like to talk about today, is the private sector. You see, UNEP, Reef World, I talked about governments and NGOs. And a key sector in the equation is the private sector, the diving and snorkeling industry. This includes the training agencies, big ones like PADI, SSI, even the supply chain of all the gears that we use. This is a very important sector in the work that we do. I will speak about the program, but I want to make sure that I honor the many stakeholders that are implementing this program. It is designed to empower marine tourism businesses and resource managers worldwide with a scientifically proven, scalable, ecosystem-based approach. And we reached more than 1,400 dive centers since its launch and 82 countries worldwide. Earlier, Dr. Frank said 14 countries. I will explain why adoption is different from reach. So we are Green Fins currently. You can see some of the Green Fins icons in dive centers, marine protected areas, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Green Fins is adopted in that location by the government or an NGO. I'm here to talk about these three questions, hopefully within the time limit. Why do we need responsible diving? And I want to say snorkeling is also very important. Number two, how do we reduce the impact of marine tourism activities? And number three, how can marine tourism contribute to coral reef conservation efforts? Are you ready? So I think I will be preaching to the choir if I tell you why. Tell you why we need responsible diving and snorkeling, right? We know how much, as Dr. Frank has given us, and actually there's a new study as well. There's a new study published just days ago that's $20 billion the industry is generating through diving and snorkeling. I would like also you to know that an estimated 1 million divers get certified each year. And I will not even talk about the snorkeling numbers because it's a very highly unregulated, unmonitored industry. So I see nods there. I think you know the context of why, but also let's make sure that we understand the actual threats that our ecosystems face because of tourism. So if you can look at the very bottom right, tourism is one threat there. Of course, there's bigger threats like global threats like climate change, etc. that we all know. But then the local threats that happen in different locations. Tourism is definitely one driver of damage. So anchoring is a big, very basic damage that you can see even in marine protected areas. They still sometimes drop anchors. direct diver damage. This is what I was talking about, stepping on corals, touching everything, even also wildlife. And very controversial fish feeding and all the other activities that sometimes some governments have to maneuver the dynamics of the communities that are participating. We also know that there is a demand for sustainable tourism. Our sustainability survey is just one of the many. In fact, I think Expedia and other booking platforms have seen that the divers are looking for conscious operators, and they want to know what standard they can look at to know that this operator complies with such. So, how do we reduce the marine tourism impact? And of course, it's through the Green Fins Code of Conduct. So, why such? We have developed this code of conduct, which breaks down a dive, snorkel, or live aboard business impact into 15 points or 15 areas. Everything from number one, including environmental briefing, right? It starts with like a very basic step like that. Also, how staff are trained, how the dive guides are trained is very crucial. And to teach the tourists how to dive responsibly underwater. So businesses that will follow this code of conduct will reduce their impact to the surrounding environment. That's what our studies have shown. So the 15-point Green Fins Code of Conduct provides the framework to mitigate environmental impacts effectively, with marine tourism businesses showing measurable improvements. And based on our last study, a 14% average decrease in environmental impact year to year. So if they stay on the program, they continuously reduce their negative impact. How does that work? So, well, first of all, there would be the resources and tools. So we have e-courses for dive professionals. This is the Green Fins Dive Guide e-course. And also for tourists, the Green Fins Diver e-course. So these are all available online. And we have partnerships with different training agencies to roll these out. And later this year, we're also rolling out a snorkeling guide and snorkeler e-course. We also have a lot of posters. These are all free. So you will find the Green Fins icons in many dive centers because they could download these and print them. Now, the core of this is something that I will speak about in a session tomorrow, but what is actually the secret here is the dive center's membership. So these operators, and I will speak about that tomorrow, so it's my cue not to talk more about that. Okay. But I want to show you the Green Fins members are reducing impact. So when they are members, they are being assessed every year. So they're going to look into the 15 areas of their operations through the Code of Conduct. And a case study here from the Dominican Republic, where Green Fins is being implemented by Reef, Czech, Dominican Republic, that operators have reduced negative environmental impact by a quarter by the second assessment, and in their fourth year or their fourth assessment, almost half of their negative impact or practices that create negative impact have been reduced. And we also show that 47% in this country has improved the role model behavior with their first three assessments. When we say role model behavior, this is the dive guides role modeling for their guests. And direct diver contact is, of course, something that we also monitor, and we see that it's also lesser. But as you can see, it's not 100% reduction, right? And when speaking with businesses, we know that it's not easy to implement the best practices. For example, we just talked about implementing something like no anchoring. Like the standard is the dive boat should not anchor even outside marine protected areas, unless, of course, it's a safety issue, right? But other than just reducing impact, the question that I also heard earlier in the other panels is how do we make sure that this industry is contributing positively and not just reducing its impact? We were visited by the ocean director of IUCN. We just had a project in Bali. We just finished a project there. And I wanted to emphasize what she and I have discussed during our time together, that beyond raising awareness, it is critical to work on other levers of behavior change. So putting regulations is just one lever, but we need to ensure that we incentivize the engagement of these dive centers. Does it make business sense for them to be Greenfin's members? What are they getting in return? Of course, this could be, we can discuss how that is sometimes controversial, of course, but also choice architecture. Are there choices available? If we're telling the dive centers not to use sunscreen that is toxic or chemicals that clean their boats, where will they get alternatives? Are they available? So these are the things that we're also trying to work on, and how we're doing it. Very few slides left. Red time's up. We need to work with a lot of other players. So PADI is one. We're not. We are also working with other training agencies like SSI, CMAS. The PADI is the biggest, and we have a partnership called PADI Eco Center, and they will only be Eco Center if they are Greenfin's members or Greenfin certified. Also, the European Underwater Federation, of course, we are a GSTC member, and in trade shows like DEMA and ADEX, these are very important. Also, ISO standards are also important. We also need to make sure that this program aligns with international goals, especially the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. I would love to speak to you about more of these if you are interested to see how Greenfins can be in your area, how that works. Please approach me in the socials, and thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. And next, our third speaker, Jianing Huang, who is a marine sustainability correspondent at the Environmental Information Center from Taiwan. Lin is a marine travel journalist from Taiwan, and her first dive 12 years ago opened her eyes to the ocean's beauty and changed her life. Since then, she has reported on and actively promoted marine conservation and sustainable tourism, bringing global trends to Taiwan and sharing Taiwan's ocean stories with the world. Personally, I've actually known about what she's been writing before actually meeting her in person. She shares a lot of very nice things in Taiwan. Lin.
Hola, ni hao. We are also closer to Coral Triangle, Taiwan. And we also have 3 Greenfin dive centers in Taiwan. Yeah, and this is our marine life in Taiwan. Today I want to share our marine ocean story. And Taiwan is famous for technology, but we also have beautiful marine ecosystem. Taiwan is in East Asia. We have over 100 islands. And look at these photos. We have diverse coral reef and seagrass bay. And we also have large animals like whales, or sea turtles, sharks, dolphins, and horseshoe crabs. And we also have small critters like nudibranch and these tiny orange pears. Have you ever saw coral snapping? Spawning, coral spawning. This is our in our Taiwan coral spawning. So this rich ecosystem have made our marine tourism grow fast in the past 10 years. Why does Taiwan have such a rich ecosystem? The coral crucial bring warm water, and we are close to Coral Triangle. These factors give Taiwan high coral cover, and the diving industry relies on this ecosystem. However, with climate change, coral reef face many threats. For example, in this photo, the reef used to be like a beautiful garden. I think this photo maybe just 5 years ago, but now with the warm water, more than half of the coral has died. When reefs die, it's not only bad for marine life, but it's also hurt the diving industry. They need to find something, find a new site. The diving industry is quite special because it depends on healthy reefs, but the ocean is huge. So how do we know which areas are healthy? and which one have problems, and how can we encourage more people to help protect the ocean. So that's why our government, the Ocean Conservation Administration, work with the private sector through 3 partner systems with diving center, NGO, and divers. And partnerships are important. Next, I will introduce the key approach and outcome of these 3 systems and share a case study. Partner System 1. The Ocean Conservation Administration works with Dive Center. By raising awareness of marine conservation within the diving community, we can protect the ocean while still developing tourism. There are 2 projects under System 1. They have different targets, and Dive Center can join both. The first project is Ocean Cleanup, which started 2021. The government funding to 45 dive centers across Taiwan to organize the cleanup dives. And the dive centers can invite divers to join the cleanup for free. The second project is coral monitoring, which started last year. The project is more challenging because it's trained dive instructor to monitor coral reef together with marine expert. It's a government, industry, and academia collaboration. These instructors bring marine ecosystem knowledge back to their dive centers. They share it with their co-workers and consumers. The dive center also have to monitor coral at one selected dive site. Right now, 25 dive centers across Taiwan have joined this project. And if there is an emergency, such as coral bleaching or ghost net, they can quickly report it to the government through a line chat, just like WhatsApp, very quickly. So government can deal with this. Now let's look at the case study. A company name called Taiwan Dive Center. It's a brand name, not Taiwan government's. It's located in Kending at the southern tip of Taiwan. The dive center not only joined both projects, but also work with local elementary schools. They sponsor community students to learn scuba diving and teach them about coral ecosystem. The owner hoped to give these kids a valuable skill. Since they live in countryside, many students have to move to the city for their high school and university education. That's why the owner offered this opportunity. If the student they enjoy studying, their volunteer experience will help them when they apply to school. If they don't like to study, they still have a chance to become dive instructor and return to their hometown to work. After the student complete their training, Taiwan Dive Center holds free ocean cleanup events for them every month. These events are also open to tourists, but the tourists need to pay for their equipment. And usually they also doing another diving trip, so for the dive shop they can get more income. So far, more than 1,000 people have enjoyed the ocean cleanup trips. The boat is very small. Taiwan Dive Center even hold the underwater graduate ceremony. This one. And elementary school students receive their diplomas in the sea. So they have to be training. This has been done for 6 years. Some companies also support this project by joining the dives and traveling to Kending 3 days and 2 nights. So this also helps for the tourism. One of the company invests over $60,000 US this year to arrange meaningful diving trips for its employees. Taiwan Dive Center not only combine the government's ocean cleanup and coral monitoring project, but also training local students to develop diving skills. Because of its positive brand and image, it attracts more tourists and companies to join their diving trip, creating a positive economic circle. Partnership System 2 is working with NGO through the community-based marine conservation project. This project has 60 areas of conservation action. And Partner System 3 is work with divers. Actually, it works with everyone. The system allows everyone, including divers, to report marine life, sightseeing, or environmental problem online. So everyone can help protect the ocean. So in conclusion, this system I shared today shows how collaboration can protect coral reef, support local community, and create positive business outcome. So let's keep diving and save the ocean. Vinaka. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you, Lynn. And now for Helen. Helen Sykes, owner of Marine Ecology Consulting and also director of Resort Support. Helen is a British and Fijian national with experience in scuba diving and resort management, coral reef research, and sustainable tourism. Living in Fiji for almost 30 years with her own private sector company, Marine Ecology Consulting, she often works in the gaps that lie between conservation, educational organizations, government, traditional Fijian communities, and tourism operators. Helen.
Yes, I'm Vinaka. So I like the introduction. I think it shows me what I am. I'm a person who knows a little bit about a lot of things. Might not always know a lot about one particular thing, but I will try to give you a little bit of an idea of what we've been doing in Fiji, the Fijian perspective. I just came from the presentation on the Cook Islands where they were telling me what you can do with a very tiny country and about what you can attempt to do with a huge area of the country. Fiji's kind of big in the little field and very small in the big field. So just to introduce you to Fiji, for those of you who've flown in to Suva and not much else, we have 2 large islands and about 300 small islands around the place. We actually have more than 450 tourism accommodation providers, but about 120 to 150 are larger resorts that are based on the coast. And these are people who are really selling our marine environment. This is what Fiji has come to rely on within its tourism perspective, is the coral reef. So we have about 120 practitioners here on a large scale who are really involved in the marine tourism. What I do want to point out to you on this map is the blue areas that you can see around the green. These are our coral reefs, and around this area we have over 10,000 kilometers of coral reefs, and we have lots of different kinds of coral reefs. So our reef tourism is very diverse. We have little fringing reefs where people go snorkeling. We have places where people fly out to go specifically diving on great high coral reefs and walls. We have liverboard dive tourism. So we have quite a high density here. Now let me see if I can make it a visual work. What am I pointing at? Where am I pointing this to make it work? No. That one. Yeah. All right. So we have 3 things that we've been asked to talk about here, which was reef protection, coral restoration, responsible diving. And I will touch on reef protection and responsible diving, but I think that the previous speakers have done this very well. I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is sometimes coral restoration. Coral restoration is where people are actually going out and planting corals in reefs that have already become damaged, for the most part. And it's very nice if we can actually stop that damage happening, but then there are areas where you have to perhaps look at what do you do where it has been damaged. And we have got reef restoration projects across Fiji. Some of you might be going to take part in them on Friday. I don't know, it's one of the things that was on offer. There is no regulation of this in Fiji. There is no best practice of this in Fiji. People are developing their own projects. And I want to introduce you to the fact that there are pros and cons. And when I'm talking to people who are practitioners, and I'm talking to people who are policymakers, I think this is something that we need to look at, that there's best practice guidelines need to be done for this, as well as other forms of tourism. So most of what we do in Fiji is involving what we nicely call fragmentation. Fragmentation is basically taking a hammer to a coral. So you are breaking up a coral that is a healthy coral somewhere, and you are replanting it elsewhere. There are ways to do it, and there are ways that don't work very well. Most of the ones in Fiji are involving the branching corals. These are the fast-growing, pretty corals that everybody perceives, and they can be quite easily broken up. When I say hammer, I may be over-dramatising that. It can be carefully clipped off and taken and planted elsewhere. So over here on this side, you see most of the ways that this has been done in Fiji. The most common one is you put them onto a tray table. So you will take fragments of a coral, you will plant them onto something that looks a bit like a bed frame out on the reef, you'll grow them out there, and then you may plant them out on the reef later on. The other one at the top here that is quite commonly done is to make little artificial reef systems where you may cement rocks together and plant on those. Less frequently done, but is being tried in Fiji, is growing corals on a rope. They're about here. They do quite well there because they grow in 3 dimensions, but obviously they're not forming reefs, then you have to move them. And then there's one called a Christmas tree, which is where you have like a metal structure which is floating at the top and buoyed at the bottom. And again, it's a lot like a rope. You're growing it away from the reef. It's not getting predators, but then you have to put it back somewhere. There's been a couple of innovative ideas recently in Fiji, which are sculpture parks. And I'm not quite sure if any of these have actually started yet. They've been looked at a little bit sideways. I know that sculpture parks have been tried in other places in the world, and as far as I know, we haven't done it yet, but there has been somebody who wants to put down some sort of Greek statues that people can swim around. And then there's a rather alarming looking one made of very sharp parts of metal, which looks great, but I worry about it at low tide around snorkelers because it could just look like a bit like a trap. But these are different things that are going on around different areas of Fiji. Generally in the places where we have the most concentrated tourism and where we have the most family tourism. It's not happening out in the places where people are going to experience the wild reef. Not all projects work, so we have definite failures and we have definite successes. And this is one of the problems with it not being a regulated or best practice thing. If you have not addressed why the corals died in the first place, then you can be breaking up corals from a place where they're very happy and putting them into a place where corals die. And the more logical answer to this is that things would die there as well. And quite often this can be where there's a river flooding out, there's a lot of sedimentation, there might have been coastal development that changed the currents, there might have been a big cyclone, there might have been crown of thorns outbreaks or coral bleaching. But if you haven't addressed the reason why the corals grow, if you haven't addressed that sedimentation, then you are not really going to succeed on this. The other problem is if you plant only a low diversity of species, so you're not planting everything that is involved in making a fully diverse coral reef, you're just doing the pretty ones that grow quickly. And the photographs I'm showing you here are things that have been left on the reef around Fiji when a project has failed. So I don't know if the photographs show it well, because if you're just looking at it in silhouette, it looks like pretty corals. But everything you see here is metal left on the reef with dead corals on it, where there has been little concrete blocks, so the concrete blocks have corals growing on them, or there's ropes, or there's frames, and nobody goes back to pick these up. So, you know, to me, if you're going to do a project where you're going to plant them somewhere along the line, you better have somebody who's going to go back and pick this stuff up if it doesn't work. There are methods, and there are plenty of publications on how you can do this. There is a reef rehabilitation manual that goes through all of these different ways that you can do it. But there's a very nice publication, the citations at the bottom, on looking at how these coral restoration methods succeed. And this is another issue that happens when people just plant corals and they don't monitor. If you do not go back and see if it works, you cannot prove anything. And people can make all of these claims about coral restoration, but they are not, for the most part, doing the monitoring. Again, there are exceptions of best practice. But a lot of these, they might go as far as coral gardening and their survival rate might be a certain level, but then when you take them down to planting them out, then the survival rate goes way down. Or if you look at long-term planting. So there are several different ways. As I've said, in Fiji, we're mostly doing direct transplantation or coral gardening to the top level, basically. But down at the bottom, you'll see one called larval enhancement. And larval enhancement is something that's being tried in Australia, where basically they're capturing the spawn. When the corals do spawn, they're capturing the spawn and bringing them together, and then keeping them in laboratories so they actually will then start to grow. You'll get the full biodiversity there, and this is something that I think is going to be something in the future. So the other thing we have to understand is the scale of coral planting. Most of the coral planting that's going on is out front of a resort somewhere, small area of reef, little coral trail for the snorkelers to go through, maybe a project where divers can go down and take part in planting or cleaning corals, but it's going to be a small area, and there's multiple publications out there now that basically it feels good. It's a very happy thing to go and do, but it's not going to save the reefs. We have 10,000 kilometers of reef in Fiji. How are we going to plant all of those? You're going to be doing these very small things. And it's been shown again and again that these cannot be scaled up. That coral planting is not a replacement for action on climate change. It's great at growing corals at small scales. So the scientific people now are looking at how to focus the monitoring, get the scientific rigor up, and how can you scale this up. And this is going to involve community stewardship, because you want to get the villages involved as well. It's not enough for a tourist to come and plant a coral and then go away. And use of biodegradable materials. Let's not have stainless steel sculptures on the reef that are going to be there forever. So there is a new activity that's going on, and some of you may have come across this in your regions. We are being approached at the moment by these people. So the Great Barrier Reef Foundation is an Australian organisation. They're a non-profit making, not-for-profit organisation. And one of the things that they are doing is they are developing the Reef Seed Initiative. So the idea of this is exactly this: to collect larvae at the time of spawning, aquaculture it on site, on plant, and then plant them out onto the corals. So you're not just breaking up corals and you're not just taking certain types. You are actually taking a full sample of what should be out on the reef. And the concept is to bring effectively a container with a laboratory in it and take it to a place on site, and to do this out there and to help to increase the aquaculture. They want to bring it to 3 hubs in the Pacific. They're doing it in Australia and the Pacific. I'm part of the Pacific Advisory Group on this, where we're starting to look for, in Fiji, where would we trial this. I'm not sure it's going to work in the outer islands. It's going to require electricity. It's going to require a certain level of technological support. So I feel that in Fiji, the chances are this will get located in a tourism area where we've got resorts that have a marine biologist on staff that's already involved in conservation activities. But I believe this is already being tried in other parts of the world. So it will be interesting to see if this actually improves the benefits and takes away a lot of the issues that we've had with coral restoration. But I think that we have to be cautious, and I think it's one of these things that's very easy to jump on, let's plant corals, right? And it's really, that's not necessarily going to be the answer. So I wanted to cover this before I went back onto protection, which I think is going to be more important in the long run. But reef seed is something that might be worth looking for in the next few years. We'll see how this goes here. Alternatives in Fiji that we already do is we already are active in reef protection, and this is not necessarily just an alternative to coral restoration, but it can be used to support coral restoration as well. Because the last thing you want when you're a resort and you've got this nice planted coral area is a whole bunch of snorkelers going around and standing on it or touching it or dropping the anchor on it, right? So you need to have some kind of protection and zoning if you're going to be restoring coral. Here in Fiji, we have basically 3 levels of this. The largest and the oldest one is working with the traditional communities. So we have a system in Fiji of tamboos, where traditional resource owners who own the fishing rights to their reefs in front of their traditional areas here, they control who fishes and how they are fished. So they can consider, I want to make this area protected. We can work with them as scientific partners and advise them how to do this best. And we had the locally managed marine areas network here for a long time. Over 20 years now, we have 440 or more than 440 communities now have their own small marine protected areas, which are part of them managing their larger area. A few of these have tourism involvement, not many. Most of them are specifically for fisheries management, but in some of them, communities are running their own snorkel businesses, or they're running homestays so that people can come and stay in the village and go and snorkel into their marine protected areas. A couple of them are supported by dive tourism, where dive liveaboard boats go in and day boats go in, and they provide a certain amount of money for each diver that goes in to support that local taboo. So that is an informal network based on the traditions of what marine management in Fiji was always about. We also have tourism operators who are working with the communities to create marine protected areas of various levels. Sometimes it's just please don't fish in front of the resort. Sometimes it's as big as proper management with zonations to where you can snorkel, where you can dive, where you can be involved in different activities. We did a report with the Wildlife Conservation Society a few years ago, and we know that there's at least 50 and probably more of the large resorts around Fiji who already have these kind of organisations. So the tourism is already starting to do this kind of thing, but again, it's in a piecemeal manner. It's not an organised effort, but people are working with their own communities around Fiji. We also have a few legally recognised statutory marine protected areas, and this is done under the Fisheries Act of Fiji. The government gets involved. It's been done, for example, some of you might have heard about Shark Reef Marine Reserve, which is where there's a shark feeding scuba diving thing going on. That's been a statutory marine reserve for several years now. From a community perspective, it's not always a positive because it means that the community has to give up their rights to the marine resource to create that. And so it's not encouraged down the traditional way, but this is the way that the government can take part in this. We have fewer than 5 at the moment. A lot of people would then ask, okay, you've got a marine protected area, but how does that increase coral cover? You can see how a marine protected area can increase fish numbers, but what's that actually doing for the coral? Well, this is photographs from a very small project over on Bengal Lagoon, which is showing that some of these are corals that are actually adapting to climate change, and they are getting to live in marine protected areas and spread. So what's happening here in these pictures, you see these very bright colours? This is a fairly recent paper which is quoted down here in 2020, which is showing that some corals are evolving what we might call natural sunblock. So this is a pigment that is helping to reflect radiation, that is harmful radiation during coral bleaching events. And the corals that are showing these bright, bright colours are just surviving a little bit longer through high water temperatures, long enough that they can come back to their natural colours and continue to grow. And we are seeing this in Fiji, and we're seeing it in the marine protected areas, and we're seeing it elsewhere as well, but we're seeing a lot of it in the marine protected areas. So how is this working? You protect it from fishing. If you protect it from fishing, you're going to have more fish and animals that actually eat seaweed and the algae that covers the reef. If you've got more herbivores, they're eating the algae, you've got a nice clean reef, you're going to have more coral settlement and survival. Then you've got these bright corals that are adapting to heat stress that are more likely to be able to settle and grow. And so basically, just simply by taking fishermen out of the equation, you are creating an environment where the corals do show these adaptations, they've got a better chance of survival. And if you're planting these corals, they'll have a better chance of survival in this kind of environment. The protection, as we've already seen a lot of, so I won't go into this a lot, also depends a lot on responsible guidelines. So diving and snorkeling and other water users, they need to have some level of guidelines that's going to help them out. There's been a recent publication through SPREC, the Responsible Marine Wildlife Viewing Guidelines, which is basically more about large megafauna, but covers things like not stepping on the coral and these kind of things. The middle one is an example of one of the management plans for one of the large marine protected areas we have here, where you have the rules of that specific protected area and also where the divers are providing financial support to this marine park. And the Coral Reef Alliance, I'm sure you know about the Coral Reef Alliance. These were the guys who were the precursors perhaps of green fins, and we were using these 30 years ago, but we didn't have all of the online resources around here. But these kind of things, the green fins would fit in perfectly here. It's very important. And I think your point about making sure that the mentors are showing it, that the dive guides do it, is so important, because we now have tourists who come down and they know this stuff. And if you've got a dive guide that's standing on a coral reef, or heaven forbid, writing their names in the coral, which I've seen, right, the tourists definitely know about it. I get sent some weird photographs sometimes, you know. So I think these kind of briefings are very important for the dive guides as well as the tourists. The tourists have more understanding most of the time. So I just want to come back to what I really want to the take-home points for this. You can do coral restoration in a certain area for a certain purpose, as long as you acknowledge that what you're doing is you're making people happy in a certain area and you're raising awareness, and you can certainly use it as an awareness-raising tool. But if you have poor imitations, then this can actually contribute to coral mortality. You've got to make sure that you know why you're doing it, and if you haven't addressed the stress factors that kill the coral there in the first place, it's a waste of time. You've got to plan these, maintain them, monitor them, and they should be looking at biodiversity and have plans in place to remove junk from the reef if you have left something that's all died. In some places, you just leave it alone, it will come back. So, in protected areas can remove the stress factors, they can contribute to coral adaptation, but we need to make sure that there is education and support. And this is not just dives. Snorkelers, kayakers, paddleboarders, all of the water users, jet skis, we need to incorporate this, not just the fins. We need to make sure that we get a lot of everybody into this area. So, thank you very much.
Dr. Frank, how do you ensure effective enforcement across the 6 countries to safeguard the efforts and commitment to the CTI-CFF? Maybe I'll just set it in 2 different options. So first, maybe for Dr. Frank about the issue of enforcement based on the aspect of do you have any ability to enforce things, and then move to you, Jeff, to share a bit about that. Let's say, verification aspect over long term rather than one-time audit. Thank you. Here, you can explain afterwards.
Thank you. As with all regional organizations, especially when it's a government organization, you work with the governments, help them in policy development, making sure that the right type of policy is in place, supported by the appropriate legislation. But in terms of enforcement, the enforcement is actually left to the countries to actually take control. We've got, I spent 20 years in the Pacific region working for SCREP, and we need a lot of work in terms of putting in place very, very good, very solid legislation, but things were not improving, and it comes down to enforcement. The lack of enforcement causes the problem to persist, and in the end, as Helen said, many of the community actors walk away from the whole process. So it's really up to the countries to be able to make sure that they have the supporting mechanism when the legislation is put in place to make sure that it is well looked after and enforced properly to get effective outcomes.
And you can share about the long-term aspect.
I would always say that enforcement is just one lever of behavior change. There are many ways to push for standards or standard best practices. So RARE has a whole framework that is levers of behavior change. So other than enforcement, what do we provide to the stakeholders? The governance mechanisms. Of course, with the policy, of the education part, but then maybe choice architecture. Do they have options? What are the available options for the users? When I say users, I mean the people, the tourists, or the tourism businesses. So long term, I think, well, Reef does not enforce. We are an NGO. I understand the frustration of pushing regulation, and then in our countries we have solid guidelines, for example, that are published, right? You can see a lot of the guidelines we've talked about today, but really, for me, voluntary compliance is also a way, right? So you incentivize or you make it visible the benefits to the stakeholders, and they will comply voluntarily. I think that's stronger than just enforcement.
And also for those that want to learn more, tomorrow we will have in the morning a whole workshop about the standards and the whole process. By the way, at the beginning of there will be about 10-15 minutes that will be for learning about the scraps, exactly that one. Their guidelines that were published last year. So Christina from SBTO and also Zaidi will share some insights on that, and then you will to hear from them about the Griffin. So you're welcome to join that one. Jennifer Lowe is asking, how do tourists ensure that they're booking with a coral restoration operator that is actually good, or is it better? Is there a better way to support reefs, or I not good at all? I like to answer that. The coral restoration is something very, very specific, very particular. It's not that you go and every dive center offers that. It's usually a very specific activity that may or may not be happening in the region, in an area. And if so, that would be very specific organizations that would offer that. There is no standardization for that. I mean, we just heard, we have also partners that spoke at another activity. They're here in the audience from Coral Gardeners, very active here in Fiji, started in Tahiti. We heard some comments from Helen. You just have to do a lot of due diligence. So you have to read carefully.
I think that you could probably look them up online, and there are people who are doing the monitoring, and there are people who are publishing their results. And if somebody's doing it properly, they should be shouting about it. So if somebody's just saying, "Oh, around coral," but there's actually no further information, then that's possibly somebody you should be doubtful of. But I think that the ones who are making the effort to do the monitoring will definitely be letting you know about the successes.
Yeah, in Taiwan, we also saw the problems. So our scientists and government already make the rule guideline for our environment. So in Taiwan, you cannot catch the coral and do that coral planting. You have to apply to government, and government will, with the scientists, to review your application and the place if you can do, and then you can do. And also you need to work with experts. So that's why we have the our Ocean Conservation Administration try to make a system to work with our system to work with dive centers and try to make this easier for tourists, because they are difficult to find which one is good, which one is bad. So we try to make the same rule in Taiwan. Thank you.
A little bit to a different topic. So, Helen, you mentioned about, explain on how protection from fishing likely increases, well, in certain cases, not 1% everywhere, increases herbivores that would take care and maintain the corals and reduce the algae there, which eventually leads to better coral settlement, growth, and health in general. But I want to address this question to Frank, who on this balance between fishing and tourist activities and protection. So it's a point here, that balance between local fishermen and protected areas. In certain cases, it can be combined with tourism, but in other cases, it's competing. It's a certain resource can be used by local fishermen, perhaps that they've been in that area for generations, or perhaps not. And then tourist activities that may or may not be from the local region or from externally. So just some comments on that, if you don't mind sharing.
Our efforts in working with local communities what we try to do is get them to also include the local village people or the people who live along the coast. And it's worked quite well actually. We've had very structured MPA systems put in place with proper management structures. But then there are others where you have community-based approaches like what our colleagues in Fiji are doing. But it's really about making sure that everybody becomes part of the solution. So you can have tourists come in, and as Helen said, if you have a guide who doesn't know what they're doing, you can get into trouble. So it has to be done in a way that everybody becomes part of the solution. The MPAs, sometimes you have MPAs that cover a much larger area, and you work community-based systems in the MPA. So they can be conflicting at times, but most of the time, the MPA, which is a much more modern way of looking after the reef systems, and then you have your own traditional ways of doing things, and they've actually found out a way of how to coexist, and in that way, they respect one another's approaches and making sure that the greater benefit of the reef and the benefit to the people is realized in a big way.
Thank you. And I'll use that as the last question because our time is up. For you, Deb, keeping with the fish group, but not fisheries, but also feeding fish. You mentioned before about certain expectations, something for me on a personal level that drives me nuts. Seeing people feeding fish and oh yeah, they expect it so that they can take a photo of many fish, and you know which one I'm talking about, the yellow spot, like the yellow stripes, and can take a photo. Now, I know that many of the customers don't really care about that. Anyway, there are fish there. Anyway, you can catch a photo with the fish. So once people know, it's like, oh, yeah, they want to do the right thing. And where does it come from? Any comment from your side of the three means of dealing with this challenge and the perception of like that's the expectation. The guys expect the customers to want that, but it's actually not true.
I think what we really are looking for is connection with nature. I think that is what unites tourists and businesses. We are creating an experience for them. And sometimes when we are pursuing that perfect experience, we want to guarantee that they will interact with the fish, or in other locations, it would be bigger animals like whale sharks or whales, right? So that is the promise of the business sometimes. And I'd like to look deeper into that and ask ourselves, why? Why do we want that? Why do we want fish to swarm around us? So I guess it's a call for all of our stakeholders and all of us, because the deep question is, why are we going into the ocean in the first place? Why do tourists come to dive and snorkel? It's really to find that connection with these other species and the other world underwater. So I think if we are clear with that, and we understand that we are visitors to this new underwater world for many of our guests, then I think it will be very clear to all of us as well that feeding the fish is not natural. That is not the wild. That is not. We are just being pressured so that we can create the perfect experience. But I know deep inside us, and everyone in this room, we know how to build that connection with nature, how we can get guests to appreciate the fish that is naturally feeding their natural food, right? So, however, Roy, I'd like to say very quickly that there are many cultures that involve interacting with wildlife and also even extracting for their cultural purposes. That is why it's not as simple. It's very nuanced. I don't want to say anything to judge those cultures, but I think it's also time to rethink that and see whether we want that as a tourism experience.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, the other panelists, I really enjoyed Deb's last comments that I think leave us with a little bit of something to think about. So let's end with this. And for everyone in the audience, remember that 4 people here are going to be here for a little bit more while and also tomorrow, so feel free to go chat with them, ask them, inquire, be in touch afterwards. And you can just stay because I need to say a few words. Well, you can go down if you feel comfortable. Yes, yes. So I can walk around. Okay, let's do the slide. There's a slide, right? That's some information for now. Good. So, we don't have a window here. I don't know how the weather is. Hopefully it's not going to rain. Knock on wood, where's wood, where's wood? There will be shuttles departing starting at 5:40, so that's about 20 minutes from now, from Sheraton to the port of Delaware, the marina over there. Over there, there are a number of restaurants that will give you 15% off. There's one that offers 25% off if you show them the badge that you're coming from the conference. So go there. Many of the participants will go there. And feel free to have dinner with a group of people that you're already connected with. You haven't seen for many years anymore, and finally seeing there. If you decide that it's a nice offer, but you don't want to see people for the rest of the day, you need some rest, then you can either stay here if you're staying in this hotel, or there will be shuttles departing at 6 to Delaware, Walla, and Nadi area if you're staying in other places. And just like yesterday, when the bus is full, there will be another one. So if you're late for 2 minutes or so, that should be fine. But if you're late for an hour or so, then probably you need to find your own way to get to the airport. And look at the app. You will see what time exactly there are shuttles that go back to the Sheraton and shuttle transfers that go back to the other resorts. And other locations. And tomorrow we will reconvene in the morning at 9 a.m. Is that right? Double checking. Yes. Thank you for all the notes from different people that are not only the GSTC team. That means we're all engaged in supporting this conference. That's it. Thank you so much. See you later.